Okay, so there's just a little bit of this last section that I wasn't able to get on the last video. Um, so like I was saying earlier, it is really only the middle class that is controlling the directory. So one of the major challenges here then is that it's really only representing a small group of French society. So what we're going to see happen is that the aristocracy is going to try to revolt against the royalist uprising, or sorry, they're going to attempt a royalist uprising, that is, in October of 1795. All right, and this is when we first really see the emergence of Napoleon. He is going to be called in. He just happens to be in Paris at the time of the royalist uprising, and so he helps bring down the uh, the revolt. And so you're going to actually see that at this point, then this constitutional republic that is in the form of the directory. That's basically what this government is, right? And it does have some checks and balances because ultimately, you have this group of directors, but you also have a legislative body. The problem is, though, this government is completely dependent on military protection because you're going to have these threats of uprisings against it. All right, you're also going to see that the sans-culottes are really not in favor of the directory. They keep criticizing the government and its economic policies, but the sans-culottes at this point really don't have enough influence to force change, so they're going to be really unhappy. You're also going to see one person in particular try to overthrow the directory. His name is Gracchus Babeuf. All right, and he organizes the Conspiracy of Equals, and it's formed to try to overthrow the overthrow the directory and try to replace it with a more democratic government. And he wanted them to abolish private property and enforce equality. So basically, realize that the directory is a little bit more of a conservative response to what was happening in the Reign of Terror. So you could say that Gracchus Babeuf is trying to bring things more to the left. In a lot of ways, people see Babeuf as like advocating kind of a precursor to modern communism. But the directory gets rid of Babeuf pretty easily and has him guillotined. All right, you're also going to see once the planned economy goes away, there's going to be some growing inflation, and this is going to make the public increasingly dissatisfied with the government, but the directory is basically going to ignore them. So at this point, the government is bankrupt, it's very corrupt, it's unwilling to control inflation, but the inflation is severely hurting the impoverished masses of French peasants, all right? So, something has to give, all right? Ultimately, you run the risk again to have some sort of major uprising against the Directory, which is exactly what we had happen with the storming of the Bastille, right? So, here we are kind of coming full circle. There are elections in April of 1797, and some royalists are going to be victorious at this point. So, you see maybe the potential for change, maybe actually bringing back some sort of monarch, but the Directory actually annuls the results of the election. So, at this point, you kind of say, all right, is this government really Republican as it claims to be, if it's just going to get rid of election results that don't favor it? So, I mean, the results of the election show us that really even the Directory itself, which claims to be a republic, is getting rid of the idea of a free or constitutional government. All right. You're going to see the only reason why the Directory retains power for as long as it does is because of the military. All right, so military successes during the Directory help it remain in power until 1799. All right, the military defeats the first coalition in 1797, so that's something that keeps the Directory relatively strong. It's stopping foreign opposition. In particular, it's going to experience some victories against England, although not all victories against England. I just realized I think I am on to a new slide here. Yeah. Okay. So I mean, at this point, England is really isolated as one of the only major opponents to France at this point. But France isn't going to be so anyway. You're going to see that in Egypt, they're all the way in Egypt actually. The French are going to defeat the English armies in what's known as the Battle of the Pyramids in 1798. All right. But later, Napoleon's going to lose a lot of his navy under the leadership of Lord Horatio Nelson in the Battle of the Nile, which also takes place in 1798. So there's some military victories going up to 1799 before the Directory dissolves, um, but not exclusively. All right, and again, this military leadership is largely under Napoleon. So how does the Directory dissolve then? Well, you guessed it, Napoleon is involved in this process. All right. There is a conspiracy that's emerging to try to save the revolution and prevent a royalist return to power. There are enough people that are dissatisfied with the Directory that there is a thought um, that there may be an actual royalist return, bringing back of the king. Remember Abbé Sieyès, the person who wrote What is the Third Estate? He becomes the leader of this conspiracy. All right, and what he does is he invites Napoleon to join these conspirators to overthrow the Directory. And so once Napoleon returns to Egypt, or returns from Egypt, that is, after the Battle of the Pyramids and the Battle of the Nile, um, he ends up engaging in a coup detat, a seizure of the state, right? It's called coup detat Brumaire because it's named after the month of Brumaire, which is the second month of the French Revolutionary calendar. So Napoleon returns from Egypt with his forces and he drives all the legislators out of the Legislative Assembly. So in order to overthrow the entire Directory, you got to get rid of the directors and the legislatures. All right. And there is a new constitution established, and now we have the beginning of what's called a consulate era. Okay, so Napoleon calls before a plebiscite, which is a general referendum, a call for the entire population to vote, and there's an overwhelming agreement for Napoleon to be the first consul, so the first kind of executive leader of France after the Directory is dissolved. Okay, so really what we're going to see when Napoleon takes over is one form of democracy being replaced by another one. So Napoleon is going to replace the Directory, which was a weaker democracy, with a stronger one. So we'll pick up next time with the Napoleonic era.